The Radio Forest Podcast.
Forrest, this is Dicky Barrett.
Dicky Barrett, how are you, man?
Good, how are you?
Good. I've got a question for you. There's a story I've been telling for 20 years. It sort of involves you, and now it's been so long, I don't know if the story's true or not, so I'm hoping I can get this verified by you.
All right.
Okay, so you've got an older brother, right? You guys are Irish twins?
Yes.
Okay, so this is about 2002 or so. I'm in Boston at a thing for Samuel Adams. A bunch of rock stars are there, Johnny Knoxville, Gene Simmons, broadcasting live all day. We go to a Boston Red Sox game after, and then we go out and hit the town, and it was told to me that it was your brother that hosted and drove us around. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's the Mighty Mighty Bosstones' singer's brother. And I was like, no way, that's cool. So we end up in this little hidden bar, and you had to have a suit jacket to get in. And I'm 21 at the time. I'm hammered. I'm starting to black out. They're like, sir, you can't come in. You don't have a suit jacket. Your brother talked into letting me get in there. And then I go up to the bar and order a Pabst Blue Ribbon in a can. They're like, sir, it's mixed drinks only. And again, your brother steps in and this guy's cool. He's with me. So they let me hang out and drink all night. Do you think that story's true? Because I have no way of verifying. This is, pre-Facebook and all this. And so I wouldn't know who is who. And I'm blacked out drunk at that time.
That was my brother Billy. He was a driver, and he worked in all the hotels. He knows the town like nobody else. That's the way he operated. He was a doorman many, many places. He's 11 months older than I am. That's him. That's exactly the way he operates. That's exactly the way he rolls. And that's my brother Billy. Your story is completely verified, authentic. It could be nobody else but him.
He came in like a town car, but he was driving it. I'm like, how does this dude have his own town car? I didn't know he drove, so please tell him that for 20 years in my mind, I've been thanking him for not letting me get kicked out of a Boston bar when I was 21, because he didn't know me, but he's like, this guy's cool, let him hang out. So your brother totally rules.
I promise I will.
Hey, congratulations on the new band. It's Dicky Barrett from the Mighty Mighty Bosstones, and the Defiant is the new group.
Thank you so much.
It sounds a little bit more punkish than the Bosstones. Would you agree with that assessment? I mean, you guys already had hints of that. So from the writing standpoint, would that hold up?
Perhaps. I've never really written trying to push a song into any direction or put it in any kind of a box. I sort of allow it to be what it wants to be. So, I mean, it's definitely minus the horn section, so that might have something to do with it. But, the high-energy songs, for the most part, that had something to say, and however they came out is however they came out. And I'm glad you liked them.
I think Everybody Loves Me is probably my favorite song. Let's talk about the band members a little bit. How did you end up coming across Pete from the Offspring? Have you known him for a long time? I mean, with your connection through the Jimmy Kimmel Show, being a music fan, going to shows, and then being in a touring band, I assume you just eventually know everybody, but what about Pete from the Offspring?
Definitely crossing paths and admiring his work, and anytime you would be at a festival and Offspring were also on the bill, that Pete was definitely the engine that drove that machine, and a beast of a drummer. So, when what happened to Pete, he was instantly the guy we thought we should call. And by that point, me and Greg were already started the process. Greg is the premier songwriter for the band Smash Mouth, and the huge hits, from that band, that was Greg's work. So early on, I had an idea. I wanted to work with some other people, and I had some song ideas, and I had some musical notions in my head. And I said, maybe I'll call Greg and see if he wants to work with me, which has always been my plan, is to surround myself with people that are far more talented than I am. So Greg said, yeah, let's give it a shot. And we both agreed that if whatever we created stunk, we would never speak of it again and quietly walk away from it.
Yeah.
In no time at all, we realized that we were producing something that was damn good. And that's when we said, well, let's see if Pete wants to be involved in this. And then from there, we added Johnny Rio from the Street Dogs and a guy named Joey LaRocca from a LA punk band called the Briggs.
Now, with Greg from Smash Mouth, their lead singer, Steve, he passed away actually here in Boise. I'm in Boise right now. He passed away in Boise last year. Nobody in town had any idea he was living here. Did you come across him at all with your connection through Greg, or was that your own separate relationship?
Greg and Steve parted ways a while ago, but when that happened, Greg was devastated because they had been through so much together. And but I didn't know that he lived in Boise either. I thought he was living in Las Vegas, but I don't know. You know, I didn't know. But that was part of Greg's past, and he was deeply saddened by that, as was the music community, because Steve was liked. He was a liked guy. He had his demons. You know, it's not any of my business, certainly, but he was struggling at times. But anytime I crossed paths with the band Smash Mouth, those guys were very, very nice to us, to me and my band.
2004, you started as the announcer for Jimmy Kimmel Live, and I've always wondered about that gig. That's not that much work, right? But do you have to be available for every single show? What's your workload like? And then can you be like, well, I'm gone for 3 weeks touring with the Bosstones, or are they like, we'll get somebody else? How does that play out? Is that a lot of work?
I would never allow that to happen. That would have been suicide for me. Once they realized, well, we can have somebody that doesn't have this horrible accent and terrible quality to his voice, you know, for less money, then I would be gone. So anytime they needed me to be on that microphone, I was on that microphone. And I enjoyed it. And, you know, was it easy? Yes, for the most part. I was there for 20 years, so there was, by the end of that time, or at some point, there was a lot that I was doing to add to that show, and I enjoyed it while also flying very low. I didn't really have a high profile, I don't think, but maybe people were well aware.
You had to have met everybody in the world then, right? 20 years. There's everybody from actors to musicians to comedians. Everybody's probably come through there, and with touring with the Bosstones, you've had to have met everybody, right? Is there anybody left, or who are some of the big ones that you were, I guess, starstruck around, either touring or through the Jimmy Kimmel show?
I don't think I was ever really so much starstruck, and I don't think anybody was anxious really to meet me, but I certainly was in the presence of a lot of great people. One of the most interesting things, I think, is one of my favorite guests was always Magic Johnson. And growing up in Boston the way I did, I was a Larry Bird lover, and the Lakers and Magic Johnson were clearly the enemy. Magic's first appearance on the show, Jimmy introduced me and he goes, "This is Dicky Barrett." He's a huge Celtics fan. And then from there for years, whenever Magic would come on the show, he'd come over and say hello to me and say, "How's my favorite Celtics fan?" And just a genuine and a very good guy. So that surprised me, that I ended up really enjoying and loving a guy like Magic. But yeah, you know, A to Z, I guess I've met them all, and it was pretty exciting and a thrill to have that job.
Let's go back and talk about the album for the Defiant now that you guys have out. And you touched on it a little bit, talking about working with Greg and Pete. How is the writing? Is the writing very different from the Bosstones because you had so many people in that band? Or was it very similar in the way that you guys came up with songs for the Defiant?
I think it was similar. And I think that, you know, in the modern world, people like to think of a band sitting in some rehearsal studio or sitting around with acoustic guitars and going, "What do you think of this? And what do you think of that?" And I'm old enough to remember the days when it was necessary to do that. But today, you know, sadly and less romantically, you trade files and you go, "Hey, here's an idea I have. Is this worth anything?" And then Greg will say, "Here's some music I have, and do you have any lyrics for this?" And that's sort of the way the Bosstones have been doing it for years. And once we decided we were going to write an album or start work on music, that's exactly what we'd do. And there'd be various songwriters and different people, and I'd say, you know, would start trading ideas and passing them around. And so that's what I was used to, and that's what I'd been doing, and that's what we did when we made this Defiant record.
What about the guys from the Bosstones? I thought I read somewhere that you said, "Oh yeah, we're still fine," and I still talk to those guys. And I noticed the band still posts on Instagram somewhat regularly. So is there any sort of communication back and forth between you and the guys, or a couple of them?
Those are my best friends. We grew up together. We, you know, went to hell and back together, and we've had some of the greatest experiences, you know, any guys could have as a group together. So that'll never change. And going forward, I never say never. Yeah, there is communication. We definitely talk to each other, and I love them very much.
When did your journey with tattoos start, and is it still continuing now? And a side question, because of your background with drawing and illustration, have you designed any of your own tattoos yourself?
Probably designed some. I can't necessarily think of it. I usually, my journey began in Albany, New York, when I walked into a tattoo parlor. And this is a long time ago. I was 17 years old, and they didn't have tattoos in Boston. That's why I was in Albany, New York. And I believe the guy's name was Spalding, was his last name. And he tattooed a small skull with a shamrock behind it on my shoulder. It sat there, and I liked it. And then when I started touring, I started getting them like stickers on a suitcase in different cities. And one of the biggest mistakes I made is I've never really written down who did what. So both of my arms are covered in tattoos, and I don't think of them a whole lot anymore the way I once did. And I think the last tattoo I got was my youngest daughter's name, buried somewhere that I have to look around for if I wanted to find it. I appreciate the artwork. I mean, it's the art in tattooing now is far greater than it was when I first walked into that tattoo parlor, and I admire the talent that the artists have these days still. But like I said, I don't think about it a whole lot.
What's the inspiration maybe behind the song from the Defiant, "We Make Drugs"? Because that can be taken a number of different ways. "We Make Drugs"
is a very heavy-handed attack on the pharmaceutical industries and their crimes and mistakes and their desire to just, like all huge corporations and industries, and it's all about the bottom line and their desire to make as much money as possible, but in a fun way.
It's Dicky Barrett. The Defiant album is out now from the Mighty Mighty Bosstones as well, and from the movie Clueless, and from Jimmy Kimmel Live. And Dicky, please, again, tell your brother that I still appreciate to this day what he did for me back in Boston some 20-odd years ago.
I promise I will, young man. You take care of yourself.